Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. This is a B1 level social studies course and we're going to be talking today about the suffrage movement. So in this lesson we'll think about the women's suffrage movement. So first we're going to look at some vocabulary words and then see if you know the answers to the questions below. So suffrage just means the right to vote. And to vote means to show, usually by marking a paper, which person you want to have in political power. So, when did women gain the right to vote in the United States? How did women fight for the right to vote? What was the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? And what did it say? And don't worry if you don't know the answers to those questions, because that's what we'll be learning in today's lesson. But first we're going to look at some vocabulary. So we're going to match the words below to the definitions. You can pause the video and try that on your own, and then restart when you're ready to check the answers. All right, so A, legal or moral freedoms. That would be number 3, rights. To support something publicly would be to advocate, number 9. The right to vote, as we said, number 2 is suffrage. A person who campaigns for a group of people who do not have the right to vote in elections, that would be a suffragist, number 1. To refuse is number 5, to deny. To try to influence a politician or the government to make them change their opinion about something, that is number 8, lobbying. A formal change or addition to a law or document, that would be an amendment, number 7. Land and buildings, that's number 6, property. Being equal in rights and opportunities is number 4, equality. And a way to do something is number 10, tactic. All right, so the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was made in 1920, and it gave women the right to vote. And why do you think the 19th Amendment was necessary? Well, before that time, women didn't have the right to vote. And how were things different before 1920? There were some other requirements for voting, like land ownership and things like that, but we'll learn a little bit more about that as we go along. All right, so you're going to read the text and then we'll answer the questions. You can pause the video and read on your own, or you can follow along as I read. At first, the U.S. Constitution didn't have rules about who could vote. The states decided. Most states only allowed white men who owned land to vote. Over time, they allowed almost all white men to vote. After the Civil War, the Constitution added 3 amendments. These changes freed slaves, made them citizens, and allowed them to vote. The 14th Amendment, added in 1868, said that voters should be male only. This was the first time a federal document said this. In the 1840s, some women started to ask for the right to vote, but it wasn't until 1920 that women were given this right. So what did the U.S. Constitution say about who could vote? Well, at first, there weren't any rules. It was left up to the states. And then after the Civil War, there were some changes made. The 14th Amendment said that voters had to be men. And in the 1840s, women started to ask for the right to vote. So the text mentioned that women started asking for the right to vote in the 1840s, but they didn't get it until 1920. So what do you think happened between the 1840s and 1920? And why do you think it took so long for women to get the right to vote? So those are just some questions to think about. All right, we're going to continue with the text. Again, you can pause the video and read on your own or follow along as I read. The goal of the women's suffrage movement was to give women the right to vote in the United States. The movement began in the mid 19th century and continued for more than 70 years. Women organized themselves into groups and held meetings to discuss their rights. They organized peaceful protests and marches, gave speeches, published newspapers, and lobbied to make their voices heard. While most suffragists used nonviolent ways to achieve their goals, few activists used other ways. Some suffragists protested outside of the White House, and some were arrested and sent to prison for their actions. In prison, some women went on hunger strikes in prison to bring more attention to the issue. A small number of suffragists even did some violent actions, such as breaking windows and starting fires. Despite many difficulties, the suffrage movement was successful. In 1869, Wyoming became the first state to give women the right to vote, and other states followed. However, it took several decades before women's suffrage became a national issue. In 1920, after years of struggle, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution finally granted women the right to vote. So, are these questions true or false? All members of the women's suffrage movement fought in the same ways. Well, that was false because it said mostly they were peaceful and nonviolent, but there were a few that were violent, and they also used different methods. Some suffragists went to prison, that was true. And success came quickly for the women's suffrage movement, that is false. All right, so we're going to read Haua's opinion of the women's suffrage movement. And so, do you agree with her? Why or why not? In my view, they were heroes. This is because they saw that something was unfair and they came together to do something about it. And they continued fighting until they succeeded, even though it was difficult. They are a great example to us today. We can learn a lot from them when we think about making positive changes in our communities. So, do you agree with her or not? This is Naima. I think the women's suffrage movement was a fantastic thing. However, I think using violence was a mistake, specifically breaking windows or starting fires. I don't agree with violence. Of course, it was only a small number of people, but breaking windows or starting fires is dangerous. It probably made people angry too. Luckily, most people didn't use this approach. So, again, think about if you agree or disagree with her opinion, and then maybe write down some reasons why. Jung Suk feels that the women's suffrage movement should have done things differently. So, do you agree with her? Why or why not? I don't think the women's suffrage movement was that effective. Of course, it's a good thing to campaign for the right to vote, but it took them such a long time to succeed. This means that they used the wrong tactics. Does marching really make a difference? I think they should have used more direct tactics. All right, so they all had different opinions about the women's suffrage movement, but what points did they agree on? You can take a few moments to look that over and then restart when you're ready to check your answers. So basically, they all agreed that the women's suffrage movement was a good thing, but they disagreed about the best way for women to succeed. All right, these are some phrases that you can use for giving opinions, and they also gave reasons and examples. So, which of these expressions are for giving opinions, which are for giving reasons, and which are for giving examples? So, we'll start with opinions, and we'll make that in blue. So, opinions would be things like, in my view, it seems to me, I think that, as I see it, in my opinion, From my perspective, if you ask me, as far as I'm concerned, I believe that the way I see it, and personally, I feel that. Those are all ways of expressing opinion. Now we'll look at reasons. This is because. I think that's it. This is because. Or perhaps since could be a reason. And then for giving examples, we would have to illustrate, for example, specifically, and those would be examples of examples, phrases that you can use for examples. Okay, so you're going to write a short text expressing your own view of the women's suffrage movement. And so think about what we've covered in this lesson and take notes of your ideas and expressions you can use to give opinions, reasons, and examples. So on this side, you're going to write what your view is of the suffrage movement, and on this side, the reasons and examples for your views. And then here are the phrases that you can use when you're writing your own review. All right, so we're going to review the vocabulary. So go ahead and see if you can fill in the blanks with the words from the boxes, and then restart the video when you're ready to continue. Okay, number 1, a suffragist is someone who fought for women's right to vote. Women were denied the right to vote for many years. At the time of the women's suffrage movement, women did not have the same suffrage rights as men. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution gave women the right to vote. Suffragists used various tactics, such as protests and hunger strikes, to draw attention to their cause. Lobbying is a strategy that involves trying to influence politicians to pass laws in favor of a particular cause. Women had to fight for their rights. And at one time, only men who owned property could vote. All right, and here's some review. So now you should be able to answer the questions from the start of the lesson. When did women gain the right to vote? How did they fight for the right to vote? What was the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? What did it say? And that brings us to the end of today's video. Please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any questions or if you would like me to review your writing, send me a message in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.